I've never been the type to believe in supernatural things. That's just not how I was raised. My parents were all about logic, and I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. Still, there are some things in life that defy all logic, and what I witnessed that summer is one of them. I'm not saying I'm 100% sure about what happened, but I know this. Whatever it wasn't normal. It all started one summer night when I was 17. I was living with my parents in the little house on Chestnut Street, and like most nights, I was hanging out with my best friend Tom. We were walking around town, talking about whatever typical teenager stuff we talked about. Sports, school. We'd always walk past the old church at the end of Main Street. It had been abandoned for years, but something about it always felt off. Maybe it was the overgrown ivy creeping up the side, or the way the windows were boarded up as if trying to keep something hidden. Tom had always joked about the place, calling it the haunted church or the home of the devil's playground. I didn't take him seriously, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little uneasy passing by there late at night. One evening in late June, after a particularly hot day, Tom and I were walking back from the diner on the corner of Maple and Pine, our usual hangout spot. We had just finished a game of pool and were heading home when we decided to cut through the alley near the old church. We'd walked this way dozens of times before, but that night, something was different. The air was thick, heavy, like a storm was coming. There was a sudden chill and the kind of stillness that you don't normally feel in a small town. We both stopped at the same time. "You feel that?" Tom asked, his voice low. I nodded. "Yeah, feels like we're being watched." We didn't think much of it, but as we walked a little further, the feeling grew stronger. I remember thinking it was just our imagination playing tricks on us. But when we reached the old church, we heard something, a sound coming from inside. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then the noise grew louder. It sounded like scratching, clawing against wood. And then something else, a voice. It wasn't clear at first, but it was definitely a voice, low and raspy. It sounded like someone or something was calling for help. I've never been one to scare easily, but in that moment, every hair on the back of my neck stood up. Tom looked at me, and I saw the fear in his eyes. "We need to leave," he said, his voice shaking. I wanted to, but I was frozen. I wanted to know what was making that sound, but at the same time, I didn't want to find out. But we were already there, so we crept closer to the boarded-up door, trying to peek through the cracks. That's when I saw it. A shadow, dark and formless, moving behind one of the windows. It wasn't a person. It was something else. I could feel the heat in my chest rise, like something was squeezing the air out of me. My mind was racing, and I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Then, the door creaked. Tom and I both jumped back. The door opened just a crack, and the shadow, the thing, stepped out. I remember the way it looked, though I don't fully understand how it could have been. It was like a person, but not. Its shape was wrong, like a black mass that shifted unnaturally. I don't even know why we didn't run immediately. Maybe we were too shocked. Maybe we were waiting for it to speak, to explain what it was. But it didn't. Instead, it just stood there, staring at us. And then, the most terrifying thing happened. It spoke. In a voice that was both inside my head and in the air around me, it said, "You're next." I don't remember exactly how we got home. I know we ran, but I don't remember much of the run itself. When we finally made it back to my house, we were both out of breath, but I could tell Tom was shaken, just like me. For the next few days, I couldn't shake that feeling. The shadow followed me in my dreams, And sometimes, when I was walking alone, I could feel it lurking just behind me. I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the mind, some silly teenage scare. But deep down, I knew that what we'd seen wasn't just a figment of our imagination. Tom didn't come over for a week after that night, and when he finally did, he was different. He was quiet, withdrawn, like something had changed inside him. He told me he'd seen the shadow again. Not outside the church this time, but in his own house, standing in the corner of his room. He said it was watching him, waiting for him to sleep. That's when I realized something. The shadow wasn't just something we saw that night. It was following us. The climax. The following weeks were a blur of fear and confusion. I tried to go back to my normal life, but the shadow never left. I started hearing the scratching sound at night. I'd wake up to the feeling of someone standing over me, breathing down my neck. It wasn't just me. My parents heard it too. They thought it was the house settling, but I knew better. Then one night, after a particularly bad dream, I woke up to find my hand burning. The same burning sensation I'd felt on the night we encountered the shadow. It was as if the thing had marked me, and I could feel it growing stronger each day. That's when I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I went back to the church, alone. No Tom. No one else to stop me. I don't know why I thought I could fix it by going back. Maybe I was looking for answers. Or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that it was all in my head. But as I stood in front of that old, rotting church, I realized something. The shadow wasn't just after us, it was after me. I stepped inside, and the air turned cold. The scratching was louder now. It was coming from beneath the floorboards, from deep inside the church's foundation. I knew I wasn't going to leave until I figured out what it wanted. I won't go into the details of what happened next. There are some things that are too horrifying to fully describe, but I'll say this. I did confront the shadow. I don't know how or why, but in that moment, I felt something shift. It wasn't just the shadow that I had to face, but the darkness inside myself. In the end, I left that church, and I never went back. The shadow, it stopped following me. I don't know if it's gone for good, or if it's still out there, lurking, waiting for someone else to see it. But I do know this. That night changed me. It made me realize that some things can't be explained away. And some shadows, they don't just disappear. They stay with you, sometimes forever. So here I am, years later, sharing this story with you. It's been over a decade since that night, and I still think about it, about the shadow, the church, and the feeling that something was always watching me. I don't know what I saw that night, and I don't expect you to believe me. But if you ever find yourself walking near an old, abandoned church, especially one that feels like it's hiding something, just be careful. Because some shadows, they're not just of the night. They're of something much darker.